Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Campfire Stories. Jay Smiley here, your tour guide into the strange, the unknown, the terrifying. Tonight, I submit another story to the Grimm Society. The Ghost Ship. Have you ever wanted to see something so badly, but when you did, you regretted every last second of it? When I first saw the ship, it looked amazing. The trip to get there was long and boring, just like every other family road trip usually was, but now I was absolutely excited. My mom just got done telling us that old ship was where we were going to be spending the night tonight. It was enormous and looked like it belonged in a museum or some kind of old shipyard. As my mom looked at me, she smiled when she saw the look of awe in my eyes. I was 14 years old and had a love for historical things, and my mom knew I would love exploring that old ship. It was from the 30s and now had been converted into a floating hotel that was permanently docked. The thought of it was amazing to me. She said a lot of the old ship was even kept preserved, and it was like its own slice right out of history. She looked at me excitedly as we all got out of the car, and I saw a sign that read, "Mysteries from the Deep." Well, when I saw this, my eyes lit up. It was a Titanic exhibit, and today was the opening day. My mom told us how fun it was going to be to actually see items that were salvaged from the bottom of the ocean, and I couldn't wait. But I was the only one. You see, my sisters didn't really care. They had no interest in the ship at all, and my dad was no different. They just wanted to go to the rooms and were way more concerned about planning the trip tomorrow for Disneyland. But I was determined today to go exploring as much as possible, so I begged my mom to go with me to see the exhibit right away. She looked equally as excited as me. We both had the same passion for seeing old things. So she grabbed my hand, gave me a hug, and we were off to explore while my dad and my sisters checked into the hotel. We had so much fun looking at all the old rooms that were preserved behind glass walls. Each one was a bit different and had its own feel. But for me, it was amazing, like I was in some kind of time machine. Everything was so well kept and the works of art were amazing. We looked into all the rooms and my mom went on and on about how pristine all the antiques were. We were both just so mesmerized by what we were seeing, imagining how life must have been on board this ship when it was in its prime. We didn't even realize that we were all alone. We kept exploring, passing by more and more rooms on our way to the exhibit. The further we made our way deeper into those corridors and narrow hallways, the dimmer the lighting became. And that's when I started to feel a bit uneasy. As we got to the end of the hall, I saw a sign that read "Pool Room." It was pointing to the right corridor, and another sign that pointed towards the exhibit to the left. And that's when we both started to hear the noises. They were coming from the right corridor. It sounded like a large group of people were in the pool room. I could hear laughter and water splashing around. It sounded like a whole lot of people were having a good time swimming. She looked at me and told me that me and my sisters should go swimming later. I agreed as we started to walk down the left corridor, and we got to a big open room and saw the sign for the exhibit, and it was amazing. There were so many unique items that had been rescued from the depths of the ocean. I really could just go on and on about it, but I won't, because that's not what's important. To me, what's important is what I heard coming from the other side of that door. When I first saw the door, it looked just like something from out of one of those old World War II movies. It was big and metal and had one of those metal wheels that sealed it shut. I knew that it must be important, a way down to the bowels of the ship, and above it were letters that spelled out "Boiler Room." As I got closer to the door, I saw that it was completely sealed shut. I figured it was because the ship was docked, so there really was no reason for anybody to be in that boiler room, not if the engines weren't on. But that is when the strangest sound reached my ear. It sounded like distant screaming, and it was coming from the other side of that door, like a group of people, and they were all yelling out in agony. But it was being muffled by the thick steel of the closed door. I thought I could hear banging. It sounded like someone was hitting that door with something, banging loudly on the metal. I could hear their muffled screams crying out, begging me for help. As I heard this, I got closer. I had to do something. I had to open that door. I had to try to help. But when I grabbed onto that metal wheel and tried to turn it, I instantly let go and screamed out in pain. It was scalding hot. The metal, it burned into my palms as soon as I touched it, and seared into my skin. Then I heard my mom call out from behind me. She was asking me what I was doing back there. I turned and told her what I had heard and showed her my hands, but when I tried to touch the door again to show her, it wasn't hot anymore. It was ice cold, and I could no longer hear any more strange noises. And that's when the old man standing next to her started to laugh as he heard me tell my story. He was one of the crew members. He looked right into my eyes and said, "What's wrong, kid? You look like you've seen a ghost." Then he chuckled a bit as he told us that this room led into the boiler room, and it has been sealed off for many years, that no one goes in or out, that sometimes sound vibrates through the ship. People hear the strangest things sometimes, he laughed, but don't let it scare you. He was insistent that there was definitely no problem in that boiler room, that absolutely no one was down there. He was almost too insistent, and I had this feeling of dread as he talked. He knew more than he was saying. I knew he did. When we got to our rooms later that day, I took a shower, then tried to relax, but I was on edge. I just couldn't get those sounds out of my head. Someone was definitely down there, down in that boiler room. As the sun started to set, me and my sisters were feeling a bit bored, so my mom suggested that we all head down to the pool room to take a swim before it closed for the night. So me and my sisters started to head down towards the pool room that I saw earlier. That's when my older sister yelled at me, telling me that we were going in the wrong direction, that the pool was on the top deck. I told her she was stupid and that me and Mom had found the pool room earlier down by the exhibit. She looked at me like I was an idiot and told me that I could go down there if I wanted to, but they were going to go swim on the top deck. Really, I didn't care what they wanted at the time because all I wanted to do was go back to see that door. So I started to head down, but when I got into those corridors and narrow hallways again, I couldn't help but feel like the place somehow looked a bit different now. All of its charm had disappeared for me, and now it was just spooky. The lights seemed somehow dimmer than before, and as I got up to the sign for the pool room, I could still hear people inside swimming. However, instead of going in, I decided to walk over to where the entry to the exhibit was. I saw that across its opening was a red velvet rope with a closed sign hanging on it. The exhibit was closed and all the lights were turned out. I could barely make out the shape of that closed metal door in the darkness, but I really didn't want to get in trouble, so I turned around to go to the pool. As I opened the door that led into the pool room, that's when I realized all the noise that I heard earlier had stopped. In fact, I couldn't hear anything, all except for the sound of my own breathing. Then I heard footsteps starting to form in front of me. It was heading towards me, and I saw a man turn the corner. He was wearing one of those old-timey white sailor's outfits and had dark grease and oil stains all over it. But the strange thing was that he looked a few years older than me. He was so young looking. As he walked past me, he didn't say a word, and I swear I could smell this strange scent coming off of him. It smelled almost like smoke. I turned and watched him as he headed out the corridor, and watched as he walked straight towards the darkness of the exhibit room. I waited for the lights to turn on, but they never did. He walked straight into that darkness and disappeared. All I could think was how odd that was. Why didn't he turn on the lights? Then I heard the unmistakable sound of a metal scraping on metal, and the creak of a big door starting to open in the distance. Did he just open the door? He must have. I wanted so badly to go see, but the thought of going into that room that darkness made me start to tremble. So instead I turned and walked into the pool room, and that's when my heart sank into my stomach. I was in the pool room all right, but not the one that I expected. It was a preserved room, just like all the others. There was a glass wall that was sealing off the entire pool area, and through the glass, I could see an old empty pool with tattered pool chairs surrounding it. There was nothing there. No water, no people. Just an empty pool that was preserved in time. This couldn't be. That wasn't possible. I heard the people just a few minutes ago. I heard the water, the sounds of people swimming and splashing, and that man had just come out from here. What was going on? I tried to listen for those sounds again, but didn't hear anything. Maybe they were just vibrating from the top deck like the old man said earlier, but I still couldn't hear anything. Nothing except for the sound of my heart pounding in my chest. I started to breathe heavily, and I could smell that smell again. It was surrounding me. It felt like I was having a panic attack, and I ran out of that pool room as fast as I could, turning to head towards the top deck. But as I turned, I clearly heard someone say, "Hey, come on, we gotta get back to work." The voice sounded off from the darkness of that exhibit room. I stopped dead in my tracks and heard the sound of that door move again. It was opening, and as it did, I could see light starting to bleed through its opening as it began to dimly light up the darkness. Then I saw the silhouette of that boy in white pass right through the doorway. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, what was going on. I had to know. I had to find out. So I inched my way into that darkness, getting closer and closer to the light coming from that open door. As I did, I could hear the sounds of many people. It was echoing through the doorway. I got right up to the door and heard the ship come to life. The engines had turned on. I heard whistling and the sound of large mechanical metal parts start to move. Then the screams started. They started slowly at first. I heard people yelling out to shut it down. They were screaming at each other to run, to get out, that it was gonna blow. Then an explosion rang out, deafening. The walls shook, and a blast wave echoed through the ship. It was so powerful that I instantly fell to the floor to take cover. The screams were yelling out so loudly in horrible agony. That's when the light from the boiler room started to blink out. Then I saw a bright orange glow starting to form. It was getting closer and closer to me, closer to that doorway. I could feel the heat shooting out of that boiler room and smell that horrible smell. I knew exactly what it was now. It was the smell of burning flesh. It was him. It was that boy. He was with the others. They were all trying so desperately to run towards me. His entire body was lit up like a torch. His clothing was burning. They all were. They were all burning. I could see the terror in his eyes as the flames engulfed him. It was a raging inferno. It was killing everyone, and it was about to kill me. I just laid there on my stomach, shaking with tears gushing out of my eyes, and watched as they all burned. But just before the flames got to me, just before that boy's flaming, running body reached me, the door slammed shut. I watched as a man started to seal it shut. I closed my eyes and screamed out in horror and felt a pair of hands grab onto me and start to pull. Then I heard that same voice from earlier that day. It was the old man. He was smacking me in the face, telling me to calm down. I didn't know what to do, so I started swinging my fists as hard as I could. I hit him in the face and jumped up and started to bolt for the exit. I could hear him yell out as I ran, chuckling as he did. I still remember those words, the way he said them. They will haunt me for the rest of my life. What's wrong, kid? Didn't like what you saw? I told you, no one ever goes in, and no one will ever come out. Thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button so you won't miss out on more campfire stories. And tune in next time. We upload 2 times a week every week. And if you have a story that you would like to submit for a future episode, make sure to email it to us at thebrothersgrimm@gmail.com. Until next time, stay smiley, everyone.